Welcome. Sad to know that some of you experienced some issues getting here, but I'm glad that you've made it. You've made it to join us. We are excited to spend the next 50 minutes with you talking about some practices to help us improve that, close that gap of access to college for Latino, Latinx students. My name is Flora Calderon-Steck, and I'm the Recruiting and Enrollment Advisor at Rowan Cabarrus Community College.
And I am Victoria Burgas. I am the Director of Recruitment and Enrollment at Tech. Thank you all for joining us today.
And I'm Karina Diaz. I'm a Recruitment and Enrollment Advisor under Victoria at Tech.
Excellent, excellent. And Karina, if you can advance to the next slide. So people that just shares who we are. Great, great, great. And I see that some people are introducing themselves in the chat, and that's wonderful. If you were with us before we officially began, we were saying how we are envisioning this time together to be organic and more of a dialogue. We have, together we've come up with some ideas that we want to share with all of you from our collective experience, but also to hear from you, the participants who have joined us this morning. And before we move on, we put this map here just as a reminder that when we're talking about Latino, Latinx students, we're talking about students who have ties and heritage and background and roots in 21 countries south of the United States. We tend to think of them as a monolithic group, but we're highly, highly diverse, and we had a great time just sharing our own personal experiences with each other as we were preparing. So it includes islands on the Caribbean and Central America and South America. And of course, if you were with us in this morning, you learned about the diversity in the state. So great, so that's who we are. We're very excited to be with you. And on the next slide, we can see some of the ideas, yes, that we kind of pull together as a team. I don't know, Victoria, if you want to start with one of them.
Yeah, sorry, so I apologize because I've been coughing all day, but one of our focuses in pulling these practices together was just like what we've seen work, sort of anecdotally, sort of from, checking in with other counselors at other institutions, and just like what have we found that across the board seems to bear true. And so, the importance of starting early in middle school, I think can't really be overstated, just because, at least in my own work, what I found is that the sooner that you can plant the idea that college is an option, the more likely you are to see results. I know from my own personal experience, when I was in middle school, I wasn't thinking that college was an option for me. Like, I don't really remember many opportunities to really assimilate the idea that I might be going to college. There wasn't anyone that I could look up to that looked like me who had thought of college as an opportunity. And as you learned in the last presentation, a lot of our students who will be coming into our institutions will be coming in as first-generation students. So getting in early and providing the resources to overcome some of those barriers that we know are part of the first-generation experience, that's really important. Along the same lines, parent nights involving family, involving, and I know I'm skipping a bullet, but involving community partners. Again, I'm so sorry. Involving parents and community partners in the effort is also really, really important because, again, just in my own experience, the more we can surround the student or the prospective student with the idea that this is normal, this is doable, this is a real option for you, and the more we can get community investment in creating that atmosphere and expectation of the student, the more likely it is, I think, for students actually to develop the desire to want to pursue a higher education and actually have the resources necessary to follow through on that desire to pursue a higher education. And I think that's kind of where I tie in FAFSA workshops myself. A lot of the times, I think you always have a certain population of folks who like maybe have never thought about it before, or at least I sometimes run into them. You'll have a population of folks who are like, I am brand new to this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not even sure that me or my parents have thought about me going to college. And so, you know, those community partnerships really help with that population. Sometimes you have folks who already know that they want to go to college, they just have no idea how, you know, and so workshops like FAFSA, like at Forsyth Tech, Karina and I are part of a team that's talking about, you know, what do we do to get out there and do workshops about how to fill out RDS? What kinds of problems might you run into with RDS if you are living in a mixed status family? That sort of thing, because you may have folks who absolutely know that they're very interested in coming to the community college or coming to any institution of higher education. They're just not sure of the procedure, again, because they may be first generation, or they may be first generation college students in the United States. Just because your parents went to college elsewhere doesn't necessarily help you fill out the FAFSA, you know? And then presence at community events, the Latinx event, I feel like that's been something that has been a point of growth for our institution. I think that we had done a couple, and we're trying to move in that direction, just because, again, that really helps to become a standby, a constant part of the community where it's not strange to see your school there. And the more often you show up at these community events, the more likely you are to have people gravitate towards your table, like, hey, I keep seeing you around, I'm kind of curious now, that sort of thing. And I hate to dominate, so I'll hold off in case anyone else wants to jump in, sorry.
No, no, that's great. That's great. I do want to build on what Victoria has just shared with us in terms of having these events for parents as well. In the Latin American culture, in the Latino culture, we're very family centered. Family is the center of the universe. So all decisions are family based. So this is the importance of getting the parents in, doing it in the language that they can understand. From the presentation this morning, we saw that English fluency varies wildly among the parents of young students. So it's really important for us to demystify what going to college in the United States is all about. It is very different process than it is in Latin America. It's quite complex here, and the choices are much higher than in Latin America. It's a much daunting process. So as we work with students, it's also important to include the parents, because parents, like all parents, want the best for their kids, but they don't know what they don't know. So I think it's our responsibility as higher ed professionals to also work with parents. And I don't know, Karina, if you want to.
Yeah, Flora, to that point, so prior to coming to the recruitment enrollment team, I actually worked on our continuing education side of the house. And just like with all parents, it's not even just about degree programs. It's really about educating both parents and prospective students about all of the possible opportunities that there are to go into all kinds of different jobs and careers. And I know growing up, my options were be a doctor, be a teacher, be a lawyer. So you have those professions that we kind of grow up, and it's like, oh, if you're going to go to college, you're going to be one of these things. And it's only because maybe, my parents definitely weren't exposed to the thought of me being an academic advisor. I didn't even think I could be an academic. That would never even cross my mind until after I had gone to school to be a secondary education teacher. So it's really about educating not only the students about the processes and navigating all of that, but really just educating them about all the different possibilities. And it's okay if you don't want to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a teacher. You can be an electrical lineman and have an awesome career. You can be a nurse aide and build on that, and then move into degree programs. So a lot of it is actually alongside all of the other things that we just discussed, is really getting the buy-in from the parents to feel okay about their students not being whatever they imagined that their child would be, and understanding that that's okay, and they can have viable careers, and they can be successful, and they can kind of be examples for the generations that are coming after them. For me, especially working with economic and workforce development, and I had a foot in college and career readiness, the exposure of how we treat parents who are going through programs such as English as a second language, that's really going to help them feel okay with sending their child to our school over another school. And then again, I have really enjoyed being on this new team because, to Victoria's point, when we are out in the community, students are seeing people that look like them. I went through my entire public school education and honestly my university career. I didn't see anyone that looked like me, that sounded like me, that had experiences like me, that had a home life like me, who knew that when I was silent about something, I was actually saying a lot, who knew that when I needed to be pushed to ask certain questions, they knew how to do that. They knew that there were some things under there that maybe I was scared to say out loud, but they needed to be addressed. So it's really about that exposure. And I've Forsyth Tech actually had a program with their English as a Second Language program where they were going into the schools, hosting those classes within the elementary schools. And again, really early intervention, really early exposure, not only to the students, but to the parents who ultimately, again, I'm pretty old and I still have my parents help me make really big life decisions. I want what's best for the family. I want to push us all forward. And so I'm not going to make decisions without them. And so again, really important that exposure, positive exposure, while we're out there working with these students and their parents.
Yes. And so Karina's comment really points us to something that's outside of the purview of our presentation, which is staff recruitment, right? Representation and diversity is important for all the reasons that Karina so beautifully shared from her personal experience. And I can say that it's the same experience for myself as well. I want to add a personal anecdote to kind of add to the diversity of what it means to be a Latina in high school. So, for instance, in my personal experience, I went to high school in New York City, highly diverse state. I was in Queens. I mean, I was in one of the most diverse places in the world, probably. I was a recent immigrant. I had just immigrated from Costa Rica. I joined high school in junior year. And I did everything what I thought was right. I did well. I ran for student government. I was the vice president of the school. I was in AP classes. I was in the National Honor Society. I was in clubs. I was doing community service. I was what I thought doing a good job as a high school student. And not once did a school counselor ever talk to me about going to college. So, you know, as a Latina professional, the pieces when I hear about those great gaps of access is what the point of my personal anecdote is to drive home the point that it's not that Latino or other minoritized student groups are less capable. It's really about who's opening those doors. And it goes back to Karina's point about representation. And here I am in New York City, right? I'm in a Queens public school, highly diverse. So the importance about this presentation is, you know, how are we intentional? How are we aware? And how do we recognize and open those doors? So that was like a little personal anecdote to show about the diversity and to drive home the point that it's not one of capacity, it's one of opportunity and one of access and one of equity. And I also wanted to go back to one of Victoria's earlier points about the community. And we can't do this alone, right? We have limited resources at our colleges. So the importance of partnering with outside nonprofits and other schools and with each other here at the system level. And so for instance, I'm in Rowan County and Cabarrus County, but in Rowan County in particular and in Forsyth County, we have a college access nonprofit, Crosby Scholars, and they do a phenomenal job of reaching out to students. They are in the high schools. So partnering with those nonprofits really increases our reach into the high school and the high school population. In my case, it has allowed me to do those parent nights in Spanish. It was in collaboration with Crosby Scholars. So kind of leveraging those resources in your communities, participating in you know, here we are on September 24th. So this is Latino Hispanic Heritage Month because of COVID. the celebrations that usually might be going on right now are not going on, but outside of COVID, what's going on in the community, and how can we as a college be intentional in reaching out and introducing ourselves and making those community connections, because that's an entry point that is very important for this student population. And I know that Victoria would like to talk about third-party sponsorships.
Yes, so I definitely want to emphasize what Karina and what Flora have been saying about community partners. The other aspect in which I see community partnership is also sharing information. Of course, I'm speaking to a pretty biased sample, right? Because you folks are the kinds of folks who sign up for and come to a panel on Latinx recruitment, right? So assuming that you all have, have cultivated an interest in this, you may be your institution's resource for keeping abreast of this information, right? Which is so, so important. There was a particular semester, and I say this with the highest appreciation for the districts that we work with at Forsyth Tech and Forsyth and Stokes County, but there was a particular semester where I'm not exactly sure what the root cause was, but I had a couple of students in my previous role as an academic advisor who came in, and just across the board, they were like, our counselors at school are telling us that we can't come to community college. Like, we shouldn't even apply. We shouldn't even try, because we're not going to be allowed in. So we have, I think, the responsibility to combat misinformation that kind of trickles out into the community, where people may hear like an urban legend, so to speak, about, don't apply to a community college because they may use your documents against you eventually. I get that question a lot. Don't apply to a community college because either way you can't get in. Don't apply to so-and-so program because you will not be allowed to graduate with a license. Some of those things are true. Some of those things are half-truths. A lot of them are not. And so we who do stay kind of in the know about this sort of thing need to work with our community partners to make sure that appropriate information is being disseminated. Because otherwise you're just playing telephone, and sometimes students can get really hurt in that game because they're operating off of a false assumption, which is keeping them from coming to us. Third-party sponsorships is one of an example of this, I think. I still go present to Latinx groups or family groups or church groups and see a lot of surprise when I talk about how in North Carolina, you can be sponsored by an employer if you're a DACA student, and that will bring you down to the in-state rate. So yes, you're not eligible for federal financial aid or for state financial aid, but that can be the difference between having to pay the out-of-state rate out of pocket or the in-state rate out of pocket, which is enormous, and so getting that kind of information out into the community where it's just like, don't write yourself off. Whatever you do, don't write yourself off. That sort of thing is really, really important. And also building the connections with businesses to enable that sponsorship. Building the connections with community partnerships that would invite you and give you the platform to educate more people about the opportunities. I think making sure that our students don't write themselves off is a big part of this fight.
Yes, yes, and to build on that, Victoria, which is our last point on practices before we turn it to the audience to hear from you and what you're doing and your good practices. In order to combat what Victoria was just saying about this lack of information or disinformation that creates a barrier, is for your college to be very intentional and having a page that has that information, all the details that Victoria has just shared with us. So at Rowan Cabarrus, we don't have that yet. We are in the process of working on it. And in my work of kind of pushing that forward, I researched I'm in the process of research all the community colleges to see who has a page. And not very many have one. And the ones that do have one, it's very rich in detail. So it's beautiful. So if I'm a Latinx student and I happen to be undocumented or have DACA status, and I'm looking at this at a community college that has information that's for me, I already am feeling welcomed. I already feel visible. I already feel like there's a place that I can go in and belong. So that would be one of the things that would be encouraging a good promising practice for in terms of recruitment. And at Rowan Cabarrus, we are working on that. I also looked at the UNC schools, and not all of them have. The ones that I thought did a good job are UNCG, lots and lots of resources on their page, and App State, much reduced number of resources, but I felt like I had a big smile when I went on their page. It was just, I felt represented, I felt visible, I felt affirmed. I'm not even looking to go there. I just wanted to see who's putting this information out there. So that, I think that's a good practice. And it should be done towards an eye of inclusion, and put it right on the admissions page would be my advice. Like, don't make students have to dig down and drill down to get to the information. Like, why is it hidden? Why is it not front and center? We are a welcoming school. We are a community college where our policy is open door. And our mission is to help everybody improve their lives through education. So why hide it? Why make students have to dig down to get to that information, which was the case in some of the schools, but at least they had it. I haven't gone to all 58 websites, but I think I've only come up with maybe like 5 community college in North Carolina that have that presence, that web presence.
And honestly, Flora, as higher ed professionals within the community college system, like my light bulb just went off. Those 5 colleges that had the foresight to go ahead and do that, we should probably be connecting with them. So the same way that we're asking our colleagues to connect with partners and other higher ed professionals, I know that Victoria and I'm actually putting it on our to-do list.
Yes,
to seek out those folks who again had that foresight to do that, and just talk with them and see what's going on in their area that really prompted them to do that.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm not very familiar with North Carolina. I'm a somewhat recent immigrant to North Carolina. I've been here for 4 years. So it would be interesting to see, Karina, where those colleges are placed across the state. That's the next step, and see. I had not heard of them, so I don't think they're in my regional area, but good idea. So I think this is a good segue point for us to move on to point 2, which is undocumented and DACA students who face even higher barriers to access. Clearly they're welcomed, but
and just a reminder, if at any point you have a question or a comment, feel free to put it in the chat. We are actively looking at those, so do not worry about interrupting. We welcome interruption and comments and questions.
Yes. Thank you, Karina. And actually, before we go into undocumented and DACA students, this is probably a good point to ask from our participants if they have not necessarily questions, but they are welcomed. But practices that you're doing at your schools that you want to share with the whole community gather around right now. We can all learn from each other, just like Karina said.
So Andrew Gardner here with Montgomery Community College. One of the recent practices that we have done is kind of what you guys recommended, is making sure you're hiring staff that the community can relate to. So we have tried to hire individuals for our small business center because we have a lot of Latinx folks that are small business owners. So we wanted to hire somebody that can, communicate and get assistance out to those folks. So we hired that individual, and it's worked out really well as far as getting information out. And then we've also hired additional folks to be a English language learner navigator, so we can better connect with the Hispanic community, because we weren't as connected as we would like to be with the Hispanic community, and making them feel welcome to our classes. Even as our English language learner classes, we didn't have the right instructors, so we kind of just started back over. And we hired that person to seek out and get input directly from the community, because in Montgomery County, the Hispanic community, they're very community oriented in their certain neighborhoods. So we just needed somebody to help bridge that gap there for us. So that's, early start, and I'm making my to-do list based on what you guys are saying. And we're just, again, trying to restore confidence and open up dialogue with the Hispanic community there, whether they're undocumented, DACA, or just, U.S. citizens.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that would be absolutely fabulous if we could all have a Spanish-speaking student success navigator. That would be, yeah.
And
That would
Andrew,
be,
yeah, thank you. To your point, there are, I think at all of our colleges, these pockets of departments or areas where, like you just mentioned, small business center, sometimes those pockets kind of get left out of the greater picture. So I'm really glad that Montgomery saw the need and took action. So thank you. That's great.
yes. And there's a question from, oh, wow, we are getting, so from Jennifer, there's a question. Tell me about what your colleges do regarding sponsorship information. Good, that's exactly where we're going. Good question. Their business office is responsible for that process. And yes, the silo effect, absolutely. And this goes beyond serving Latinx students. This goes to serve all students with excellence. And that means breaking down those silos so that we can be cross-functional professional. So good point. So maybe we just jump on that one right now, sponsorship, and Foresight Tech does a beautiful job with that. So,
well, and I would say, I think we've definitely grown here recently. We're not to, I think, where me and Karina's utopian vision would put us necessarily, but I think you're absolutely right as far as silos. And one of the ways that at least kind of intuitively occurred to me as a way of combating that is that if I have an opportunity to talk about sponsorship to anyone, like whatever audience at the institution will have me, then we do it. Like if it's the front desk, if it's, people like the small business center, people who may not even necessarily seem like they have a part to play in this, put it in front of them, because if you at any point are in charge of answering the phone, redirecting a student, saying, oh, you thought you were interested in my department, but actually I think you're more interested over here. If you have the opportunity to tell a student, oh, by the way, don't automatically assume that there's nothing we can do for you. There is such a thing as third-party business sponsorship for DACA students, then great. That's just another way of disseminating information. Because what we found is, and again, this is not against anyone in particular or anything, what I found and part of what I was reacting against was that sometimes I would have students come in and say, yeah, I called here actually, and they told me that I shouldn't even bother applying. So, siloing information, or like, even if I have something that I think can really help DACA students, Latinx students, any kind of student, like Flora is saying, then breaking down those barriers and making sure that like whoever is likely to talk to a student knows how they can be helpful to that student, I think is really important, if that makes sense. But let me know if that didn't exactly answer the question.
No, and Victoria, I also think, unfortunately right now we don't, because not everyone knows about this opportunity, at least at Foresight Tech, we still have the opportunity that we can work one-on-one with these students and kind of be that liaison with the business office. Sometimes our business office can feel very transactional, and it's just like we're stamping this and it's a yes or a no. And sometimes the student needs, especially in kind of sensitive areas such as this, they may need someone like a recruitment and enrollment advisor that's working with them, or their academic advisor, to kind of be that liaison with the business office, and to help make that transaction go a little bit smoother. Again, right now, because we don't have people, employers knocking on our doors every single day wanting to take advantage of this, we are able to do that. But I think what that does is it kind of creates this this base for, as Victoria and Flora and I are out there recruiting both students and employers, and we're increasing this mass of people who will want to take advantage of this. We are creating those relationships with folks in positions such as the business office, to where once we do have to let go one-on-one working with students, they will be in a position to feel differently about that transaction, or understand everything around it a little bit better, so that they don't need someone like a Victoria or a Karina hand holding both the business office and the student. So just starting out small, and when you have the time and the resources to do those one-on-one connections, do it, because you're creating a base for hopefully something that's going to come down the road. So
Yes, and in my so I think ideally what it would be, exactly what Karina just said, it would be that we would, the college as an institution, from the president's office and from the foundation office, breaking those silos, would have official relationships with these businesses that are willing and eager to sponsor a DACA student. So it would be a formalized relationship. My experience here in Rowan County, it has been that it is the Latino businesses who have the restaurants and the grocery stores who want to do this. But they do need that bridge, that institutional bridge to be able to do that. And then Stacy Holiday has an excellent comment. And I'll read it out loud, and it says, and this is beautiful, so we can discuss this. We're running out of time, but this is very, very important. Thank you, Stacy, for bringing this up, particularly in the current moment that we're in. And this is what she says. There is some concern by colleges in conservative communities that publicizing supports too loudly will result in negative impact to legislation that could prevent those mechanisms that bypass the barriers. Brilliant insight. Yet, it might seem, as you've pointed out, that the advocacy and highlighting resources will do much more good than harm, even in those conservative communities. Yes. So the second clause of your statement is what we're going for. But thank you for bringing to this conversation the importance of awareness of the political moment and how our resources, our outreach recruitment efforts might be seen in our communities. And I have experienced that myself here in Rowan County. And that is when particularly high schools are bilingual in their outreach to students, there's a backlash. There's a backlash from the community and saying, why is this high school publicizing these activities for Spanish? They're in the United States. They need to learn English. So we need to be savvy in how to deal with these issues. And the first step is awareness. So thank you very much, Stacy, for bringing that up. That it is unfortunate. It is a working process. We saw in the first presentation how Latinx communities have been increasing quite rapidly. So it's a dramatic shift in particularly rural areas of the state. But still go ahead, I would say, right? Be compassionate in understanding that there's going to be a backlash and be prepared for it. It's like, why are we doing this? So be very clear on where we stand, and that is on issues of equity and justice, and not shy away from the backlash, but face it with compassion and education, because people don't know what they don't know. And being bilingual is absolutely beautiful. It just increases possibilities. So how do we get that, we create that culture where diversity is welcome and bilingualism is beautiful and different accents are exciting. But yes, thank you for that, because anyone else, and including from the participants and Stacy herself who brought it up, because that's a great point. And it is a barrier that we face. Go ahead.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Holyfield from Stanley Community College. One of the things that helps us, and it really makes a difference for a lot of especially this legislation piece of it, is taking a look at your policies. And really your policies would be able to speak across the board. But then your day-to-day procedures are the things where you need to have in your toolkit, this is where this would apply best, this is where this would apply best, this is where this would apply best. Yeah. And one of the things that's really helped us out is and this will be a little pop for Susan, is our credit by advanced standing policy, which provides opportunities for students to earn credit or earn college credit for things that they've already experienced or things that they already know or learn. But within that, one thing that helps us out to help defray the cost of tuition and things like that is our continuing education program actually has paralleled our curriculum, in that we teach the same courses, whether it's Con Ed or curriculum, and then the students are able to transfer those courses into a curriculum program later if they wish to. We've taken a look at how to create credentialing programs within our continuing education that whenever they finish, they paid the regular Con Ed rate, but they still have the same credential that's usable in the workplace, the same as any other curriculum student whenever they graduate from the programs. And so we've really taken a look at how, and this, you know, it's not really targeting just our Latinx population or specific students, but it's an opportunity across the board that any student would be able to participate in and still get the same outcome. And so if we're looking at trying to figure out how to not speak too loudly for one set of population, we've taken it from the policy level and actually broken it up to where these are the things that we can actually use. And then whenever our success coaches or our advisors are working with students, then they know here's some options that may help this student out in their situation.
Perfect. Excellent. Absolutely. Always go back to the policy, right? It's always your fallback position. It's like, why are you doing this? This is what we stand for as a community. And also what another tidbit that I want to highlight from your comments is the one of pathways from different sides of the college. So for instance, from Con Ed to the curriculum side, from ESL to the curriculum side, establishing those official pathways so that students know what's ahead. So very good. There's more. Thank you. Thank you. Here's another hard one. And this comes from Jennifer Probst. I hope I said your name well. She says, can you talk about it? And this is very hard. This is painful. Can you talk about advising students that we need to redirect them in terms of what they really want and the barrier of licensing? As advisors, is a hard process. Yes, it is. So like Victoria, I think it was saying earlier, there are some pathways that in order to practice, you need a license, like nursing, like cosmetology. Lots of our CTA pathways require a license. And by, I don't know if it's state or federal law, you have to be a US citizen or a permanent resident in order to be licensed. So what do we do as advisors when we have somebody in our office who really wants to be a nurse, but he or she is not gonna be able to practice because by law, they're not gonna be able to get licensed. So I don't have the answer. It's very painful, and it requires like, yes, but not now, not ever.
Flora, I'd like to speak on that, just again, drawing from my experiences when working with economic and workforce development. So I have kind of a two-prong approach. So one of the things, going back to early exposure, being in the community, this is not a short-term solution, so definitely understand that. So long-term, when we're having these really important conversations within the communities, we need to, again, create awareness of, again, if we're going to be exposing prospective students and their families and their parents to all these new and incredible opportunities that they have, we need to be giving them factual information and what that pathway really looks like. And so if you are an undocumented student and you do have an interest in healthcare, maybe it doesn't mean you go into nursing, but you go into something else. And I think, again, connecting that to my time in EWD, we would oftentimes have folks with criminal backgrounds who would come in and say, I have a larceny charge or a domestic battery charge, and I want to go work in a nursing home. Well, that's going to be a really hard conversation, whether or not that student is Hispanic or Latinx, or they're not. And those are conversations that we're having every day. So I think, long-term, it's really about, again, as we're exposing students to all of these opportunities, we really have to give them the truth behind it, that it's going to take all of this to get this. And if in 10 years you are still undocumented, this is what it's going to look like for you. All we can say is what it looks like now, but if then. And then the other thing is, just as we approach any other student, we have to redirect, and we can still, that's the beautiful thing about education and working in the United States. There's so many opportunities. If you say you want to be a teacher, well, that could go into a million different directions. If you say you want to be a nurse, that could go into a million different directions. It's just about exposing the student to what does that actually mean. And sometimes that means we have to be educated or learn more about, go down the rabbit hole of all the different directions that we can point the student into. So it's definitely a hard situation. at any time we're confronted with it. But that's kind of how I've always approached it. One, I always have this underlying agenda of, exposing people to all these different careers and what it means to get there. But then also always trying to redirect and stay positive and keep the student interested, because that's definitely something we don't want to do. We don't want to say, well, you've got a background, you can't do that. And then we're pushing them into something that they're not interested in. And we know how that works out. It's not usually successful.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope everybody, I want to bring your attention to the chat box, because Stacy Holiday again has shared a fantastic comment and a resource. So that's absolutely beautiful. So Karina, I think we can move to the next slide because we need to start wrapping it up, although I'm having a lot of fun. So here, okay, I'm colorblind. I hope you can see that. So here are resources. And we, let's add, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are ones that we thought we wanted to highlight. And actually, a disclosure, these came from the Forsyth Tech Community College page. So disclosure there. And of course, CFNC has a brand new website in Spanish with a lot of information, which I'm sure all of you have already gone in and looked around. Great videos. And also the great resource that Stacy has shared with us on the in the chat. Then someone else I somewhere said, can you tell us the community colleges? Let me find that. But somebody was asking about who has, oh yes, can you give us a look at which community colleges have web pages? Yes, so these are the ones that I have found. And again, I have not gone into all 58. Durham Tech, Blue Ridge Community College, Isothermal Community College. That was, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with your institution, but clearly you have it. It's right there. And Central Piedmont. And Forsyth Tech has as well. And Rowan County, Rowan Cabarrus is in the process of creating one. And so these are the and so here are some resources. Thank you, Stacy, for sharing with us. And if there's more, let's add it. UNCG is being very intentional about creating an exhaustive list. So I would keep an eye out on them, because they're very intentional, and they say so, and their page is full of resources. So we have very few minutes, but we also wanted to talk about, in terms of recruitment, we wanted to talk about the importance of the Career and College Promise Program, the CCP, particularly anybody who, for anybody, right? But especially for those students for whom financial aid is going to be a great barrier, because they're going to be paying out-of-state tuition. CCP is a great option for them. And we have a panel, a presentation on that later on today. So let's make sure that we get there and see what they have to share with us about how to use CCP as a recruitment tool and as a tool to enable students to get ahead. I think, and then the next slide, Karina, has our information. And as Karina mentioned earlier, the beautiful thing about participating in these workshops is to start networking and start, well, not start, but networking and creating these connections so that we can help one another, and using that social capital to create human capital. And I don't know, Susan, how we're doing on time.
We have 5 minutes left, so if there are any remaining comments, questions, information folks want to share, we've got a few minutes to do that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so lots of great ideas from the participants. Thank you. Any more? Links, resources, flashlights, flashpoints, highlights.
Yeah, if anyone has any scholarship opportunities that they want to throw in the chat, I will say on our last slide, and I'll go back to that in just a moment, the Golden Door Scholarship, they are a scholarship for undocumented TPS or DACA students, and that closes at the end of this month, so it's kind of a short window. They just opened up earlier this week, and they will be closing. And they are they do have preferred schools that they're working with, which none of the community colleges are listed, but they are willing to accept students who are attending other non-preferred schools. But they do prefer students in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, among others. So that's just a really great opportunity that I just recently came across and have been trying to share as much as I can. So I'll go back to that slide in a moment. But if anyone has any other scholarships that are coming open specifically for DACA, TPS, or undocumented students, please share.
Oh yeah, and thank you, Karina, for putting those schools in the chat. Thank you. And it's not exhaustive. And if you are here and your school has one, write yourself in, and we'll check you out. Okay. Well, I know that speaking for myself, this was beautiful. It's always great when you are in a room, even though we're virtual, of people who have an interest in serving Latinx students. As a Latina myself, it fills my heart with great joy.
Thank you all so much for an excellent presentation, wealth of information, and for those of you that as participants that have chimed in with questions and comments and additional resources, we certainly appreciate it. If our presenters are comfortable sharing their PowerPoint, they will do, and I see yeses, so great, thank you. They can, you know, we as I said earlier this morning, we will send them out to everyone. We'll collect them all and then send them out. So these links and these resources that you have here embedded in the presentation will be extremely helpful. So we appreciate that. So we exit the logistics here. We exit this meeting, and you use one of the 3 Zoom links that are in your agenda to determine the next breakout session that you'd like to attend. So thanks very much, everyone. Maybe I'll see some of you in the next breakout session, but we may be going different places. And then we'll gather back up just for 10 or 15 minutes at the end. So thanks again for your presentation and for everyone for joining us. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.